Hello and welcome back to Building Momentum, the show where we peel back the curtain on the exciting and often chaotic world of building a successful SaaS business. I'm Yash, your host for this show, where every episode we bring you the stories and strategies of founders who've been in the trenches, conquering churn, scaling their teams, and building products that people and businesses love. In this episode, we'll be chatting with Michael from Cerebrium. Cerebrium helps build, test, and deploy AI applications in minutes. We're excited to hear their story and the lessons they've learned along the way. We'll be dissecting the wins, the losses, and everything in between. So buckle up, grab your headphones, and get ready to dive in the world of SaaS. Hey, Michael, how are you doing today?
Hey, Ash, good yourself.
Awesome. Thank you for joining in, and thank you for having this conversation with us. The first thing that let's start off with this, right? What's the big bad problem that that Cerebrium is trying to solve today?
Yeah, so we started from out of kind of facing the problem ourselves where at our previous company, we tried to implement machine learning. And to be honest, I've been a software engineer for a while and it was probably the worst experience I've ever had. Basically,
Okay.
what that issue was, the talent was too expensive. Talent was also scarce to find. Tooling was fragmented. And, we spent as a, scale up months trying to get just one machine learning kind of based, application of our product out to production. And it took months to do that. And, we just said to ourselves, it's inaccessible for any scale up or startup to do machine learning because of the amount of risk you take and without the uncertainty that it's not going to work. But the things that did make it to production completely changed our business. And so, we got eventually acquired in that business, and we said, what if we could actually make this easier for companies and startups to actually develop? And so, I guess that's kind of our whole premise is how can we make building AI-based applications easier for companies, not just in an enterprise stage, but also just, single dev startups, Series A companies.
Understood. And so if you can share with us and the audience a little about the status quo, a little about the stage at which Cerebrium is today, that'll help put everything that you're about to say in context. So where are we today?
Yeah, so we've been going for about 2 years now, or just over 2 years. We've raised a seed round from like a bunch of investors such as like YC, Angels, Sequoia Scout Fund, Authentic Ventures, and a few others. We've got thousands of developers, hundreds of customers, and we're a team only of 4. I think we'll get later into my experience, but I like small, lean teams because there's a lot of reasons and learnings that I've had for that, and that's kind of the stage we're at today.
Interesting. And so you mentioned two things, right? So one is that the previous company, OneCard, which is where you were a CTO, you were instrumental in building out the tech operations. You scaled the team from 10 to 100, and then it got acquired. So I'm sure you were working very closely with the leaders of the startup, and you saw the whole journey of scaling up of OneCard and then eventual acquisition with Walmart as well. Why go to an incubation center, right? So why go to YC, having been through the whole journey yourself? Like, what is it that YC has to offer? I'm sure you would like 120,000 is I think what they invest. Why go to YC?
Yeah, they invest $500,000.
Okay.
But my whole reason for it, and it's actually the advice I give to many companies, to founders who look at doing YC is, I'm originally from South Africa, and I previously started companies in South Africa. And when we had the idea of starting Cerebrium, we knew that the machine learning forefront was kind of in the US. And so, my kind of whole goal was how can I get to the US, or at least not even, live there or work there, but how can I tap into the network of meeting companies, just because, even the companies here are, further ahead of machine learning, as well as have access to the talent. And so with YC, it was a phenomenal experience, but I would say the advice they actually give you, it's quite funny because they give you the simplest advice, but obviously it works and it's right. But the biggest thing that they did for us is they kind of got us into the whole networking community. So we met a ton of our first customers, both being YC companies or even just people I met in San Francisco while I was there. And 2, it gave us the networks for investors and it gave us a network for engineers. And so for me, that was the biggest value add for YC. I think if you've been, in San Francisco for 10 years and you've been working at fan companies, you already have all those connections that the money wouldn't really be worth it. And I think the value add in terms of network wouldn't be worth it. But for us, it was an entry point. We didn't really need the money at that stage, to be honest. It was purely just based on kind of a network decision.
Understood. So what you're saying is that YC as an incubation center or whatever, like very very early stage investor, the enabling part that they do in terms of putting you in touch with the right people or the access that you have is almost as important as the capital that they put in, or in some cases even more so, because capital is something that you might be able to find somewhere else. But this is something that just requires the amount of time for you to be there, right? So you have to be in SF for like 5 years, 7 years to be able to build that sort of.
I mean, I think one thing is I don't want to discount the advice. I think if you're a first time founder, 100% like the learnings YC give you are definitely there. I think for me it was my fourth company, and I did the YC startup school previously, and so I guess I just kind of I definitely learned a lot still. But at least for me, it was less about the learnings and more about the network.
Interesting. So there's something for everyone, right? So that's and so let me try and understand this a little more, because why like raise capital so early on, right? So what is it that the capital enables you to do so early on that I mean, if it's a 4 people team, why not bootstrap it out? You've been part of a company that's just gotten an exit. Why have external investors take up an equity of your company?
I mean, I think there's many reasons for that. I think the one thing that I try to do with at least technical companies, which I guess is, we're a serverless platform, is you want to build a technical moat that at least takes kind of, I would say the perfect range is about 1 to 3 years to actually execute on. So what that means is that it's a sufficiently hard problem, but it's not this like furry vision that's so far in the future, which means that at least it puts you a bit ahead of your competition in order to execute on. And so, the one thing with infrastructure is there's a lot of like complicated pieces, especially what we were trying to do, because, GPUs are expensive and, there's many other reasons.
Yeah.
And so for me and just my co-founder to do it, I would say it just was going to take a long time. And obviously we wanted to move fast. So I think the one thing with funding that I've always tried to do is I only raise when I have a very specific way to prove my hypothesis. So, I was raising a seed round. The very specific hypothesis was, and which is common for most seed companies, is there actually like problem worth solving here? And, is it large enough? And is the problem, I guess, painful enough for my businesses?
Got it. Would you advise that for, I mean, so one of the other things that we also see is that SaaS founders, as soon as they start building, as soon as they have an idea, the first thing some SaaS founders would do is they start looking for external capital without actually defining their customers really well, or the problem really well, or the solution that they are building really well as well. They start putting an investor deck together. They start putting some projections together and like a team together and stuff like that. Would you also recommend most SaaS founders to look at a hypothesis that you want to prove with a capital round? So like, let's raise 500K, let's raise $1 million and prove whether this can be done. Like, can we build a product that people will use? Can the product that we build that people are using, will they also pay for it? And stuff like that, right? So is that how an early stage SaaS founder should also look at fundraising?
100%. I think the whole mentality of I should raise like just for the sake of it, I just don't believe in. Also, maybe it's just my mentality from South Africa. There's not a lot of money to go around, so you really have to be very careful about what you spend on, and also the amount of time it takes to raise even a few $1 million, at least in South Africa. You're looking at 8 to 10 months, which is just I guess ridiculous. Whereas obviously in the US it's much shorter. And so our whole thing was, we had this idea, we started building it. I think we had 1 or 2 customers, and then we actually raised like an angel round. And then from there, we kept building and building to prove out again like the hypothesis, and that's when we got into YC, and then we raised out a seed round. But I think even as companies scale up to even like a Series A, one of the things that I just kind of disagree with is people always have these, once you hit like $1 million ARR, then you can go and raise a Series A. They call it Series A metrics. And to be honest, I just disagree with that, because I've seen so many companies get to $1 million ARR like so quickly, but they have the completely wrong foundation set. And so what happens is they scale up rapidly to 1 million, and then they either flatline or actually it's temporary, and then it just kind of decreases.
Declines,
and so I think you can even if you get to 50,000 MRR like revenue, but you've done it extremely repeatable. There's so much of your customer, you've defined it well, then go out and raise a Series A. And I promise you, if you show that to any investors, like, this is like our conversion pipeline of getting customers, this is how much they pay, this is how long the like onboarding time is. If you can show that even at 50,000, I promise you, you'll raise the Series A.
That's a very fresh and interesting perspective, right? Not to raise capital just because you hit a revenue target or a revenue milestone or a growth percentage for the last quarter or whatever. And I've also seen some SaaS founders, me being one of them, who tried to do this, and thank God I failed at it, was just because we were growing at, I think we were growing at 5% week on week for a bit when I was running a SaaS product called ClientJoy. And we did that consistently for, I think, about 3 odd months. And so I was going out into the market to raise capital to maintain the momentum, right? So which is not necessarily a good way to, I mean, I got a lot of investor interest for sure. But then COVID hit, people went, like, it was a knee-jerk reaction. Nothing happened for 6 months and it didn't work out. But fair point, yeah. The other piece that I want to understand is you're solving, so the technology that you're building is not commodity, right? So it's not something that's fairly easily buildable. It's going to take some time to build it. You have raised capital, you have a CTO, and you have yourself been also in tech roles before, and you've led larger teams. Why a small team for Cerebrium?
So the one thing I always find, I mean, you hear it often from like large founders, is in our previous company, when we grew to like a number of people, I ended up becoming basically an HR manager. Like, even though I was the CTO, I was actually just dealing with people issues every day. And so I was kind of not doing the thing that I loved. And to be honest, I just didn't see the impact of like hiring more and more people to reach a certain goal. So what I did is, my technical team, I mean, we were doing millions of dollars in revenue. Our technical team was like 10 people.
Yeah.
Just told my CEO, I was just like, I need to like, rather just pay our team more and just keep delivering because we're lean and like everyone understands the product. I mean, obviously there's different arguments for hiring more people, and when you have different product segments and things like that. But with Cerebrium is like, I just know that with our current team we can get to a certain goal, and right now our biggest problem isn't actually product, and we're moving pretty well on product. It's actually like go to market, just figuring that out. So for me, I prefer leaner teams. I feel like you get more done, you get close as a company, and so
as you said that, I feel like that is my life today at Momentum. That that I am a very, very heavily paid HR manager. Thank you for that realization. I'll figure out a way to do something else. So the other thing that I also want to understand from you is you were CTO at a company that scaled and then got acquired. Why do you have a CTO in this company? Like, why not have a co-founder and chief executive of the company who has built GTM motions before, who has run companies before, or who has played leadership roles in those things before? Like, why? And this is a debate, right? So why should an experienced person spend time understanding something that they don't know when their time is extremely valuable? Like, why do that?
So I would say the one thing is, you really have to think about the customer that we're selling to. And our customers are CTOs, like AI engineers, ML engineers, data scientists, and things like that. And so you really have to think about what that typical customer is like. And me and my entire team are engineers. So the one thing about selling to an engineer is they're extremely difficult. When you get on a call with them, which, by the way, is the first miracle, is getting on a call with an engineer.
It's very difficult. Yeah.
The second miracle is they come there, they've already looked at you, they've looked at all your competitors, they already know what your flaws are, and they're just going to like shoot out these questions. They're not looking for some slide deck and stuff. And to be honest, they ask like very technical questions, and most of the things come down to like scaling, performance, use cases, things like that. And to be honest, we just find that, especially in the case of AI, where like the problem set is more complex than traditional software problems, you're just going to have extremely technical questions that if someone doesn't have a technical understanding, then they're not going to be able to offer it. And the worst thing already is, when you have to tell an engineer, connect you to someone else that then can handle your queries, because they want to try and implement and see just the time to value of the product straight away.
Yeah.
And so with us, again, our whole thing was, okay, my CTO can build the product and keep building it. And to be honest, I still code today and contribute to the product. But then at least myself, I would say I'm not your typical CTO. I'm, I guess, relatively extroverted and like pretty good with people. So anyway, so it allows me with that technical understanding to do the go-to-market motions, do partnerships, and I guess kind of talk to all our customers that come through our pipeline and try to help them solve their problem as quickly as possible.
Interesting, right? So more often than not, and this is something that I've seen as well, that it's not always the best products that make it to the end customer. It's the people who have built out the best distribution, unless you are building for engineers, right? So because you're building for engineers, they sort of have looked at like 5 of the things. They spend their time doing the analysis. Only after that, typically they get on a call, right? So they're not on the call to, like, they'll never be sold on brand, they'll never be sold on trust, they'll never be sold on testimonials. You will tell them, hey, do you do this, right? If you don't do that, then yeah.
Well, I would
I
slightly
feel like
disagree. I would say like developers definitely do care about brand and like trust of products. I think for example, as soon as we saw like change our pricing a couple months ago, like the entire net community freaked out. People love Vercel. I think with testimonials, if a good developer on Twitter has to tweet about it, I think a lot of people would respect that person.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I think the one thing is like developers do not like hunt a product unless they're like absolutely in love with it. Like even if they like a product and they use it, let's say like we're using Riverside to record this, is unless a developer doesn't love it, they're not going to tweet about it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. That's a fair way to look at it as well. So how the other piece that I want to talk about is how do you think about short-term goals at Cerebrium, right? So how do you set them, measure them? How do, like, if I were to start a company today, how would you advise me I should think about my short-term goals?
I guess again it goes back to the hypothesis that you're trying to prove. So for us right now, along I guess part of the first kind of year or two was just getting to certain product metrics for us and performance metrics. So we hit those in the last couple months, and now for us it's purely based on like go to market and like I guess getting our top of funnel right, getting our conversions right, and then listening to user feedback. So what we do in terms of goal setting is we set obviously quarterly goals, and then we break those down into I guess what we need to reach at the end of every month. But what we do is every month we have like a kind of what we call a town hall. So we look at like, okay, what were the goals that we kind of set? This is our goal for the quarter. Are we on track? How are we doing across products? How are we doing across customers? What are the massive like big issues? And then what we also do is we do like a customer review every 2 weeks. So we go about like, all the customers that we spoke to the last 2 weeks, like what were their issues? What do they like about the product? What do they think is missing? Should we change up our current like roadmap for the next quarter? And so that's kind of how we think about long-term goals. I think one thing, it's quite funny that it's often said everywhere in like, I guess the startup manuals. But again, I think startups just don't do it as properly as they like want to. Metrics are like vitally important across your product stack to know how it performs and across like your entire sales pipeline to know how you're actually converting customers and how long it takes.
Yeah.
Every time I think I've set up the basic metrics, just because like I'm checking that box, I really feel like you actually just need to go so deep on metrics, and it actually gives you so many learnings.
Yeah, it reduces. It actually, like, while it teaches you a lot of things, it reduces your cost of learning from the company side, right? So if you don't measure, you will end up making continuing to make that mistake, and it's like just having the stove on without it just ends up really poorly. If you it's like, here's a good analogy that I came across, right? It's like being on a diet plan and not measuring the weight every day. So you never know whether you're going in the right direction or not.
I think for me, like, to put it bluntly, is it just cuts the shit. And it basically just, it doesn't lie. So it tells you exactly what is happening. You can't kind of fake the matrix. And so I think with a startup, there's so many risks that you're already like experiencing. So why not be very sure about something? So when a customer churns, you can go talk to that customer and know that they churn and try to learn from it. Versus thinking like, oh, I think like they churned for a different reason, or maybe they're going to come back and they haven't actually churned yet. I mean, you can just learn the data, what's actually happened.
Okay. The other thing that I'm really curious about is how do you maintain a balance between the things that your customers ask you to build and the things that you yourself sort of set out to build. So when you started, you must have created like a bucket list of things that Cerebrium would have. But as it turns out, as and when you have more and more conversations, you start to realize that things that are in bucket number 2 are a little low priority, but you sort of feel like it's because they've not experienced it, they don't know how good it will be for them. So like an approach like the Steve Jobs approach, which is where I know I will give the customer what they need, and then once they experience it, they will fall in love with it, versus just building everything for the customer. Where do you sit on that, and how do you maintain balance?
Look, I think that's a very tough thing to actually get right. I think it's something we're still dealing with. I think the way that we found like a common ground is we obviously look at all the user feedback and then we plan like our quarter. And then what we do is throughout the, I guess the quarter, as we talk to customers, we really try to understand like what, like when they tell us they need new features, like why, and like is that going to get them to their end goal, and also is that the only feature? Because often they might be like, oh, I needed to have like light and dark mode. And then you build it and you're like, oh, I also need like this feature. And then you're like, okay, and you build that one. And then you constantly just change your roadmap, chasing a customer that might not actually need it. So we really try to understand like, one, what is the complexity of this change? If it's something simple, like, I mean, we can probably do that in like an hour or two, that it's worth getting that through. And again, I think customers like when you react fast to like their requests. So the second thing is have enough customers actually brought it up that it's becoming an issue now. I mean, I can think of one that we're having now that a lot of customers have brought to us in the last like couple of weeks. That then I guess escalates a priority. But what we try to do is we try not deviate too much from our roadmap unless a lot of customers have brought it up, or we can like land a large customer actually releasing it.
That's, I think, a fair balanced way to look at it as well. And that's so this brings us towards the end of our conversation. And one of the things that we do is I ask you a question that our previous guest has asked and has left for you. And so that question that I have for you is in the direction of fundraising versus bootstrapping. Right? If I were to start a company now, could you share with me, or could you share with us some notes around under what circumstances should one be preferred over another? I understand that there are pros and cons of both, but under what circumstances should you prefer what path to build out the product?
I think the biggest thing is people need to just frame the problem differently. It's not whether I should raise funding or not. It's again coming back to what we said earlier. Is what's the hypothesis I'm trying to prove? Is it I know there's a problem here and I need to build a solution to try and figure it out? I would say if that's the stage that you're at, you shouldn't raise funding, because that's something that you do in your spare time. You can test with like a couple friends or clients, whatever the case may be. As soon as you've got a couple people, then you can be like, oh, I need to hire, and they're asking for these features, and like, I need to test out more. Then again, you can come to like the pre-seed route. I think the one thing that YC says that's very good is when you're at kind of the pre-seed seed stage, it's not really about who's on your cap table. It's about how quickly you can get cash in the bank and actually, again, continue testing your hypothesis. I think also at that stage, you're one of hundreds of investments with some of these firms that you're not going to get that individualized attention. And so I also just don't take money from people lightly. I put a lot of like stress on myself, so I prefer actually not raising. And I think in South Africa, we were always just, I guess, building startups there with a lack of capital. We were just always kind of programmed to get to break even as quickly as possible. And so I would say, make sure that your unit economics work. Make sure that you can test out your hypothesis. That's what it initially is. And then once you've done that, you'll feel a lot more confident going to investors, asking them for money. You will come across more confident going to investors, knowing that, look, I've proved this. I'm very confident it works. This is just going for an idea. So that's kind of how I try to raising capital, because it dilutes me as an investor. It gives me like boards and shareholders to report to, and so it adds like administrative and like stress into you. So again, I would let until you're very sure that it's the right move to do.
Interesting. And so what's your question? What's the big challenge that you are trying to currently solve for Cerebrium?
So I would say ours at the moment is kind of go to market. Like I mentioned, engineers are a very tough crowd to get in touch with. And so there's kind of two things, especially with infrastructure, is there's kind of two ways to sell an infrastructure product to an engineer. One is you either are selling it as you're starting their company, which means your brand has to be very well known. So I guess getting high brand awareness. And the second thing is either through migrations, where they're literally, say, on AWS and you're trying to move them to like your platform or GCP. But the thing with migrations is it's very nerve-wracking for every developer because like, is it actually going to be more like cheaper and more performant? And like, it kind of feels like your product's staying the same, and sometimes it takes long, and there's so many moving parts. And so migrations, you really have to have your timing very specific to catch the developer at the right time that they're thinking about migrating because maybe they've had a bad experience or it's too expensive. And so with go-to-market engineers, it's like, what have they seen that works and that's scalable? What we've seen work is like content and partnerships with other like dev tools or brands they might be familiar with. However, we haven't seen it really be scalable, as well as like So I guess my question is, what's a scalable go-to-market approach for engineers and developers when you're an infrastructure? Well, just I guess a developer tool.
That's a really really good question, and I'll tell you why, because it makes me feel good. I love it when my guests suffer from trying to give a good answer to a great question. Right? So that's as difficult of a question as it could get, and that's going to be extremely meaningful for me. Thank you, Michael, for joining in for this conversation, and for all the people who've been watching or listening to this episode, whether it is on Amazon Music or YouTube or Spotify. You will be able to find Cerebrium's link in the description. If you are a developer who's building in the space of AI, do check them out. They're building out a great product, have a great platform actually. Do check that out. Thank you for joining in.
Awesome. Thanks, Yash.